Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Secretary Work, if there's a catastrophic attack tonight on the fiscal infrastructure or the financial infrastructure of this country, I do not want to go on cable news in the morning, if there is cable news in the morning, and say the administration told us that the policy is still in development. We've got to get on this. We've been talking about it for years, and as the chairman pointed out, this was an essential part of our National Defense Authorization Act a year ago. The idea that we can continue to simply defend and never have an offensive capability, I just think is ignoring this enormous threat, which we all agree. So let me ask a one-word answer question to each of you. Do we need an offensive capability in the cyber realm in order to act as a deterrent? Secretary Work.
We need a broad range of response options to include...
Do we need an offensive cyber capability to act as a deterrent?
I would say yes, sir.
Director Clapper.
Absolutely.
Admiral Rogers.
Yes.
Thank you. The second part of that is that it can't be secret. Our instinct is to make everything secret, and the whole point of a deterrent capability is that it not be secret. So I think we need to establish what we have. I suspect we do have some significant offensive capability, but part of making it a deterrent is that it has to be made public. I think another question that needs to be addressed, and I don't necessarily think it in this hearing this morning, but in this terms of the policy, we need to define what an act of war is in the cyber area. Whether hitting Sony Pictures is an act of war or the OPM, and how do you draw those lines? And I would suggest that that's got to be part of this policy definition. And I don't mean to imply, Secretary Work, that this is easy, but it's urgent. And we just simply can't defend ourselves by saying, well, it was complicated and we didn't get to it. Changing the subject slightly, Admiral Rogers, do you believe that the dispersion of responsibility in the federal government for cyber is a potential problem? It strikes me we've got agencies and departments and bureaus, I suspect you could name 15 of them if you tried, that all have some responsibility here. Do we need to strengthen Cyber Command and make that the central repository of this policy?
I would not make Cyber Command of the Department of Defense the central repository. This is much broader than just the DoD perspective, but I will say this. I have been very public in saying we have got to simplify this structure for the outside world, because if you're on the outside looking in, and I hear this from the private sector fairly regularly, who do you want me to go to? Is it I should talk to the FBI? I should have talked to DHS? Why can't I deal with you? Do I need to talk to if I'm a financial company, should I be talking to the sector construct that we've created? We have got to try to simplify this for the private sector.
If I might add to that, Senator King, it's one of the reasons why I had a very brief commercial for just within the intelligence community of integrating the cyber picture, the common operating picture, simply from within intelligence, let alone what we do to react or protect. And that, to me, is one important thing that I have come to believe we need, along the lines of a mini NCTC or NCPC.
I would hope that would also, and that the leadership and decision making on that has to start with the White House. It has to start with the administration for an all of government approach to dealing with this dispersion of responsibility problem. I would point out parenthetically that there's been a lot of talk about China and our ability to interact with China and to respond and hold China responsible. And it's not the subject of this hearing, but the fact that we owe China trillions of dollars compromises our ability to interact with China in a firm way. It's a complicated relationship, and that's one of the things that makes it difficult. Director Clapper, do you have any idea what brought the Chinese to the table for this recent agreement with the president?
It appears that the threat of potential economic sanctions, particularly imposing them right before the visit of President Xi, I think got their attention, and that's why they dispatched Minister Meng to try to come to some sort of agreement, which is what ensued subsequently.
And I agree that it's not a definitive agreement or a treaty, but I do agree, Secretary Work, that it's a step in the right direction. At least these issues are being discussed. But countries ultimately only act in their own self-interest, and we have to convince the Chinese that it's in their interest to cut out this activity that's so detrimental to our country. Thank you, gentlemen, for your
Senator, could I
yes,
just
sir.
make one real quick comment? Just because we have not published our policy, it is so broad and encompassing, going over things like encryption, what are the types of authorities we need, does not mean that if we did have an attack tonight, we do not have the structure in place right now with the national security team to get together to try to understand who caused the attack, to understand what the implications of the attack were, and what response we should take. Those are in place right now.
But the whole point of being able to respond is deterrence so that the attack won't occur. Dr. Strangelove taught us that if you have a doomsday machine and no one knows about it, it's useless. So having a secret plan as to how we will respond isn't the point I'm trying to get at. The deal is they have to know how we will respond and therefore not attack in the first place. Thank you all, gentlemen, for your testimony.
On behalf of the chairman, let me recognize Senator Fisher.
Thank you, Senator Reid. Following up a little bit where Senator King was going on this, many of you talked about establishing norms in cyberspace. Do you think it's possible to establish or maintain that norm without enforcement behaviors? When we look at publicly identifying those who are responsible for an activity or imposing costs on them, can we do that? I'll begin with you, Mr. Secretary.
Well, I believe that trying to establish these norms are very, very helpful. In the Cold War, for example, there was a tacit agreement that we would not attack each of our early warning missile launch, the warning satellites. And so establishing these norms are very important, but they will be extremely difficult because the enforcement mechanisms in cyber are far more difficult because it's much more easy to attribute missile attacks, et cetera. So I believe that this agreement with China is a good first step, that we should strive to establish norms, especially between nation states, and establish norms which we believe are beyond the bounds, and to try to establish mechanisms by which we can work these through. But this will be very, very difficult, Senator, because it's it's much more difficult.
And we have the added problem, of course. The norms are, as Secretary Work said, really applicable to nation states. And of course, you have a whole range of non-nation state actors out there who wouldn't necessarily subscribe to these norms and would be a challenge to deal with, even if there were nation-state mutual agreement.
Admiral.
I would echo the comments of my two teammates. I'm struck by, we're all captives of our own experience. In my early days as a sailor, well before I got into this business, at the height of the Cold War out there, we knew exactly how far we could, between the Soviets and us, we knew exactly how far we could push each other. And we pushed each other at times right up to the edge. I mean, very aggressive behaviors. But we developed a set of norms. We had a series of deconfliction mechanisms in the maritime environment. We actually developed a set of signals over time so we could communicate with each other. So I'm comfortable that we're going to be able to achieve this over time in the nation-state arena. But as my teammates have said, it's the non-state actor that really complicates this to me. It's going to make this difficult.
So when we're attacked in cyberspace, how do we impose costs on those who are attacking us? Do we respond in cyberspace, or can we look at other ways to, I think, respond in an appropriate manner, say with sanctions? What would you look at, Admiral?
So what we have talked about previously is We want to make sure we don't look at this just from one narrow perspective, that we think more broadly, we look across the breadth of capabilities and advantages that we enjoy as a nation, and we bring all of that to bear as we're looking at options as to what we do, and that it's a case-by-case basis. There's no one-size-fits-all answers to this, but fundamentally, think more broadly than just cyber. Not that cyber isn't potentially a part of this. I don't mean to imply that.
Correct. Mr. Secretary, would you agree with the Admiral on that? Do you see a variety of options out there, and wouldn't it be more beneficial to us as a country to be able to have a policy that is a public policy on what those options could be and the consequences that would be felt when we are attacked?
Absolutely. And that is what I say about a broad policy, where we will respond in a time, place, and manner of our own choosing. In this case, there's an asymmetry with our nation-state potential adversaries. They are all authoritarian states. The attack surfaces that they have are far smaller than what we have as a free nation, and we value that. We do not want to close down the internet, but we are more vulnerable to a wide variety of attack surfaces than our adversaries. So we may sometimes have to respond proportionally, but in a different way than a simple cyber response. It might be sanctions, it might be a criminal indictment, it might be other reactions. So we believe very strongly that this is something where it's an interagency process. The process is established where they are taken care of and handled on a case-by-case basis.
And does the administration have a definition on what constitutes a cyber attack?
Well, any type of malicious activity which causes either damage or theft of information or IP, all of those are under either malicious cyber activities. It might be espionage. In each case, there's no defined red line for what would constitute an act.
What would be the difference between a cyber attack and cyber vandalism?
Well, I would have to make again, a case-by-case determination, and of course, important consideration here in terms of our reaction would be attribution. And that, again, it would be case-by-case.
And cyber vandalism, ma'am, do you believe, is that stealing information or IP or?
The attack by North Korea on Sony was described by the president as cyber vandalism. I was just wondering on how you distinguish that definition from a cyber attack.
Well, it didn't affect a national security entity, but it certainly did cause damage to the company. And in that case, and this is an important illustration of when we could attribute very clearly, and there was uniform agreement across the intelligence community to attribute that attack to the North Koreans, and we did sanction them.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Gentlemen, thank you for your service and for joining us here today. And Director Clapper, before I start on begin to focus on cyber policy, I think we're all very concerned about the allegations that leadership at Central Command deliberately distorted the assessments of intelligence officers related to the fight against ISIL. And I understand that there's an ongoing investigation, and I'm going to wait for the results of that investigation. But I want to say that as a member of both this committee and the Intelligence Committee, I want to, in the strongest terms possible, impress upon you the importance for all of us to receive absolutely objective and unbiased assessments. And I look forward to the results of the IG investigation, and I expect that you will hold accountable anyone who has failed in their duty in the intelligence community, no matter how high up the chain that may go.
Well, Senator, you brought up a very important consideration here, which is a great concern to me. I'm a son of an Army intelligence officer who served in World War II, Korea, and Vietnam, and I've served in various intelligence capacities for over 52 years, ranging from my first tour in Southeast Asia in the early 60s to my service now as the longest tenured DNI. And it is a almost sacred writ in intelligence, in the intelligence profession, never to politicize intelligence. I don't engage in it, I never have, and I don't condone it when it's identified. Having said that, I completely agree with you. In spite of all the media hyperbole, I think it's best that we all await the outcome of the DOD IG investigation to determine whether and to what extent there was any politicization of intelligence at CENTCOM. I will also say that the intelligence assessments from CENTCOM or any other combatant command come to the national level only through the Defense Intelligence Agency. That is the main conduit, and I will say to extent evaluator and filter for what flows into the national intelligence arena.
Thank you, Director. Turning to you, Admiral Rogers, as the Director of U.S. Cyber Command, your responsibilities include strengthening our cyber defense and our cyber deterrence posture, and I want to return to a line of questioning several of my colleagues have begun this morning. As you know, the breach of OPM computers resulted in an enormous loss of sensitive personal information. Thus far, to my knowledge, the U.S. has not responded, and to put it in the words of Deputy Secretary Work's language this morning, we haven't imposed a cost, which raises questions about whether we truly have developed the mechanisms for proportionate response to cyber attacks against the U.S. government, even after the April 2015 publication of the DoD cyber strategy. We know that if a foreign agent had been caught trying to steal U.S. personnel files in a less digital age, we would either kick them out of the country if they were a diplomat, or we'd throw them in jail if they weren't a diplomat. That would be considered a proportionate response. But in the case of the OPM breach, the U.S. government seems uncertain about what a proportionate response would look like. So I want to ask you three questions, and I'll let you take them as you may. What constitutes an act of war in cyberspace? Has the United States decided on a proportionate response in the case of the OPM cyber espionage case? And what types of information gathering by nation states, by governments, are legitimate, and what types are not?
Well, first, let me start off by saying, look, so I'm the operational commander here, and all three of the questions you've just asked me are much broader than that. I'm glad to give you an opinion, but I'm mindful of what my role is. In terms of the three things, have we defined what an act of war is? The bottom line is clearly we're still working our way through that. What are the parameters that we want to use to define what is an act of war? My going-in position is we ought to build on the framework that we have developed over time in the more conventional domains. That's a good point of departure for it. It's got a broad legal framework. It's something that people recognize, and it's where we ought to start as a point of departure. The second question was about, let's see, read my note to myself.
Proportional response to the OPM case.
Again, I think that what OPM represents is a good question about, so what are the parameters we want to use? Is it, as the DNI has said, is it the intent is within an acceptable realm? Is it scale? Is it you can do espionage at some level, for example, but if you trip some magic threshold, hey, is 20 million records, is 10 million records? Is there some scale component to this? I think we're clearly still trying to work our way through that issue, and there is no one-size-fits-all answer. I think there's recognition. I think that's clearly is what has driven this broad discussion between the United States and China, for example. That's been a positive, I would argue. And the third type, what could you repeat again, the types of information?
You know, my time has expired, so I'll cut to the chase. I think what you're hearing from all of us
Go ahead, Senator. This is an important line of questioning.
We would like to see more transparency in being able to telegraph our deterrent, because we all know that looking back into the Cold War, that our deterrent was very important, but the other side knowing what that deterrent was absolutely critical for it to be effective. And so we need to be clear about what types of information gathering by governments are considered legitimate and acceptable, and where those red lines are going to be.
I agree. I think that's an important part of the whole deterrence idea. It has to be something that's communicated and that generates understanding and expectation, and then a sense of consequence.
I think the contrast with the Cold War is a good one to think about in that, well, I think what the concern that people are raising is, should there be red lines on spying? That's really what this gets down to. We didn't have red lines during the Cold War. It was freewheeling as far as us collecting intelligence against the Soviet Union and vice versa. There were no limits on that. It was very difficult for both sides, well, more so for us. And of course, underlying the backdrop to all that was the deterrent, the nuclear deterrent, which of course restrained the behavior, even though it got rough at times, as the example that Admiral Rogers cited just in a maritime context. But there were ground rules that governed that. We're sort of in the Wild West here with cyber, where there are no limits, that we've agreed on, no red lines, certainly on collecting information, and which is what the OPM breach represented.
Director and Admiral, I would like to thank you for your forthright and candid assessment, and also I think the lesson that all of us are getting is that we really have to have some policy decisions, and you've been very helpful in fleshing that out for us. Senator Cotton.
Secretary Work, I'd like to return to an exchange you had with Senator Ayotte about the Intermediate Range Nuclear Forces Treaty, also known as the INF Treaty. Is Russia in violation of their obligations under the INF Treaty?
We believe that a system that they have in development would violate the treaty.
And you said just now in development, I thought I heard you say with Senator Ayotte that it's not deployed or it's not yet operationally capable. Is that correct?
That's my understanding. I can get back to you with a question for the record, but it is in development, and we have indicated our concern with the Russians. If they did deploy it, we believe it would violate the INF.
Thank you. Could you please do that in writing, and if it's appropriate in a classified writing, that's fine as well. I'd now like to move to the Cyber Mission Force. At the Air Force Association conference a couple weeks ago, Major General Ed Wilson, the commander of the 24th Air Force, stated that DoD's Cyber Mission Force was halfway through its buildup. How difficult is it to establish the needed infrastructure and manning across the services to create the capability that we need to defend and deter cyber threats?
Well, I'd like to start, and then I'll turn it over to Admiral Rogers. We're building to 133 total teams. 68 are cyber protection teams that are focused on our #1 mission, defense of our networks. We have 13 national mission teams that we are building to help defend our nation's critical infrastructure. And we have 27 combat mission teams that are aligned with the combatant commanders and assist them in their planning. To support those, we have 25 support teams which they can call upon for a total of 133. We're building to 6,200 military personnel, civilians, and some specialized contractors, and another 2,000 in the reserves, so about 8,400. We expect to reach that in 2018, provided there is not another government shutdown. The last time we had a government shutdown and sequestration, it put us behind by 6 months in building this. So as of right now, I think we're on track. And I turn it over to Admiral Rogers to explain how well we're doing in attracting talent.
And if I could first, let me accent, if you will, on one particular portion of DepSecDef Works comments in terms of impact of a government shutdown or sequestration for us. The last time we went through this when we shut it down, we assessed that we probably lost 6 months worth of progress because we had to shut down the school system. We went to all stop in terms of generation of capability, and like a domino, the layover effect of all of that we think cost us about 6 months of time. If we go to a BCA or sequestration level, that puts us even further behind in an environment in which we have all uniformly come to the conclusion we're not where we need to be, and we've got to be more aggressive in getting there. And you can't do that when you're shutting down your efforts, when you're cutting money. To go specifically, Senator, to the question you asked, I would tell you the generation of the teams in terms of the manpower and their capability, boy, knock on wood, is exceeding my expectations. The bigger challenge to me has been less, not that it's not an insignificant challenge, but the bigger challenge has been less the teams and more some of the enabling capabilities that really power them. The tools, if you will, the platform that we operate from, the training environment that we take for granted in every other mission set. The idea that we would take a brigade combat team, but before it went to Iraq, before it went to Afghanistan, we put it out in the National Training Center, and we put it through the spectrum of scenarios we think they're likely to encounter in their deployment. We don't have that capability right now in cyber. We have got to create that capability. It's those enablers to me. And the intelligence piece, just like any other mission set, everything we do is predicated on knowledge and insights. No different for the CENTCOM commander than it is for me. Those are the areas to me where the challenges are greater, if you will, than just the manpower. I'm not trying to minimize that.
Yeah, and how important is it that we take advantage of the existing infrastructure and capabilities that we have as you're building out the entire mission force?
I mean, that's what we're doing right now. But I will say one of our experiences, Cyber Command has now been in place for approximately 5 years. One of our insights that we've gained with practical experience, and as we're looking at both defensive response as well as potential offensive options, we need to create infrastructure that is slightly separate from the infrastructure we use at NSA. So a unified platform you've heard us talk about, it's supported in the funding. That's an important part of this. Experience has taught us this in a way that 5, 6 years ago we didn't fully understand.
Well, my time is up for questions, but I'd just like to bring to your attention that Arkansas Adjutant General Mark Berry has requested a cyber protection team at Little Rock Air Force Base. There's an 11,000 square foot facility there. It has a SCIF of 8,500 square feet. It's already had $3.5 million invested in it. One of these facilities, I understand, would cost about $4 million. It's a request that I support. I think it's harnessed resources that we've already invested. And also it's a capability they are ready to support in addition to the professional educational center that does a lot of the cyber training for the National Guard, which is less than 30 minutes away. Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, I have to comment. I'm rather struck by the irony here of before I left my office to come for this hearing, I was reviewing the directions that we're putting out to our people for shutting down and furloughing people. What better time for a cyber attack by an adversary when much of our expertise might be furloughed?
I think that's a very important comment, Director, and thank you for saying it. There are some of us who feel it's urgent that we inform the American people of the threats to our national security of another government shutdown. I believe that it was an Arkansas philosopher that said there is no education in the second kick of a mule, so I thank you for your comment. Senator McCaskill.
That's probably a Missouri mule. Director Clapper, earlier this year, I introduced a bill that would give intelligence community contractors whistleblower protections as long as those complaints were made within the chain or to the Inspector General or the GAO. So disclosures made to the press would not be protected. As you probably know, Defense Department, I know that Secretary Work knows this, that we've already put into the law in recent years whistleblower protections for the contractors at the Department of Defense. And to my knowledge, and certainly correct me if I'm wrong, any of you, I'm not aware of any classified or sensitive information that has made its way to a damaging place as a result of these protections. The 2014 Intel authorization gave these protections to the government employees within intelligence. And one of the challenges we have in government is this divide between the contractors and government employees. And frankly, whistleblower protections, I can't think of a good policy reason that we would give whistleblower protections to employees and not give them to contractors. And so I'm hopeful today that you would indicate that you believe this is an important principle and that we should move forward with this legislation.
Absolutely, Senator, and we have published internal to the intelligence community an intelligence community directive that includes whistleblowing protections for contractors. After all, that was the source of our big problem here with Mr. Snowden, who was a contractor. And so our challenge, the additional burden we have, of course, is trying to prevent the exposure of classified information outside channels. So that's why whistleblowers absolutely must be protected so that they are induced or motivated to go within the channels knowing that they'll be protected. This is a program that is managed by the Intelligence Community Inspector General, who is, of course, independent as a Senate-confirmed official.
Thank you, and I'm pleased to see that you would be supportive of that. And Secretary Work and Admiral Rogers, I assume that you would be supportive of giving whistleblower protections to intelligence community contractors?
Absolutely, I agree totally with what Director Clapper said.
Yes, ma'am, and I say this as the head of an intelligence agency.
Thank you. I want to follow up a little bit, Director Clapper, with your comment about a shutdown. Could you tell us what impact another government shutdown would have on your progress of getting the Cyber Mission Force fully operational? Excuse me, Admiral Rogers. I think that in political isolation, shutdown appeals to a certain swath of Americans, and I understand why. Because sometimes it just feels good to say, well, just shut it down, because obviously government is never going to win popularity contests, certainly not in my state. On the other hand, there's a difference between being responsible in terms of public policy and being irresponsible in terms of recognizing. I love it when some of my friends wave the Constitution in my face and then fail to read the part that we have a divided checks and balances in this country, unlike other countries. The American people sent a president of one party to the White House and elected a Congress of a different party, and that means we have to figure out how to get along. So could you talk a moment about what the impact would be to this important mission if, once again, we went down the rabbit hole of deciding the best thing to do is just to shut down government?
So if we use our experience the last time, first thing I had to do was shut down the school system. And training and education is a core component of our ability to create this workforce. To shut it all down because it was only mission essential. The second thing I was struck for, all travel that was associated with training, we had to shut all that down. So I couldn't send people to generate more insights, to gain more knowledge. We had to shut down some of our technical development efforts because of the closure. Again, put that all on hold. At a time where we have talked about the need to develop more capability, the need to develop more tools, I had to shut that all down during the period of the last shutdown. We were forced to focus our efforts on the continued day-to-day defense, which is critical, don't get me wrong, as Secretary of Work has indicated, is priority number one for us. The other concern I have is, and I have watched this play out now just in the last 10 days, I've been in command 18 months, and I will tell you the biggest thing I get from my workforce prior to the last 10 days, sir, this happened to us once in 2013. Is this going to happen again? If it is, why should I stay here working for the government? I could make a whole lot more money in the cyber arena on the outside. So in addition to the threat piece that the DNI has highlighted, my other concern is if we do this again, is the amount of our workforce that says, you know, twice in the course of 2 years, I've got a family, I've got mortgages, I've got to take care of myself. As much as I love the mission, as much as I believe in defending the nation, I can't put myself or my family through this. I've got to go work in the commercial sector. That would be terrible for us. Because people, despite all our technology, never forget, it is men and women who power this enterprise. That's our advantage.
At the risk of sounding like a smart aleck, which I do from time to time, I would say maybe we need to open some of those schools so some of my colleagues could do some math and realize the votes are not there to overcome a presidential veto. And this is a recipe for dysfunction that does not help anyone in this country, in particular our national security. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I want to just echo the comments of my colleague, Senator McCaskill. I think it's irresponsible. We've had the Secretary come before this committee and say that the number and severity of threats have not been greater since 9/11. That should be enough said in terms of what we need to do to keep continuity in funding the government. All the other things that I may have a problem with have to be second to that priority. I thank you all for your work, and Director Clapper, I thank you for your comment. Admiral Rogers, we've had briefings from you since you've taken the command, and one of the briefings I'm reminded of is the trend that you see in terms of the gap between what tends to be still an American advantage overall narrowing, particularly with nations like China and Russia, and I think you may have even mentioned Iran being an emerging threat. Can you tell me, really in the context of maybe another 6 months reset on your training, but more importantly, based on your current funding streams and your current plan, are we going to be able to widen that gap again, or is this just a matter of staying slightly ahead of our adversaries?
For right now, I think the most likely scenario is we're staying slightly ahead of our adversaries because we're trying to do so much foundational work, if you will. As I said previously, trying to overcome a very different approach over the previous decades. It's not a criticism of that approach. It was a totally different world. It led to a different prioritization. It led to a different level of effort and a different investment strategy. Clearly, we're going to have to change that. And we're changing that at a time when budgets are going down and threats, not just in cyber, but more broadly, are proliferating. I don't envy the choices that Secretary Carter and the leadership has to make. There's nothing easy here. So I think in the near term, the most likely scenario for us is how can we focus on the best investments that maximize our defensive capability while continuing to help us retain the advantage we do right now against most.
Thank you, and this question may be for Secretary Work. The announcement about the agreement with China that we're not going to basically attack each other. In the face of the compelling evidence that we have that China's done it in the past and they've denied it, why is this agreement a positive thing if, with the smoking gun information we have right now on prior attacks, theft of intellectual property, commercial data, that we have a pretty strong base of evidence to say that they're guilty of it? If they deny it, why does this agreement mean anything?
Well, in the build-up to this visit, we made it very clear through a wide variety of efforts that this was going to be something that was foremost in the discussions when President Xi came. We have made it as clear as we possibly can at every single level, from the president on down, that the Chinese cyber activities are unacceptable. And we believe that this is a good first step as a confidence-building measure where China can either demonstrate that they are serious about establishing some norms and going after cyber crimes, et cetera. But the proof will be in the pudding. I agree with Director Clapper and Admiral Rogers. It's going to be up to the Chinese to demonstrate that they're serious about this.
Would the manipulation of commercial data fall within the definition of theft under this agreement?
Well, specifically, one part of it is the theft of IP, intellectual property, for commercial advantage in, say, for example, a Chinese state enterprise. And we have agreed, at least we have made a tentative agreement that we will not do those type of activities. China has done those activities in the past. It will be up to them to prove that they won't do it in the future.
And then for anyone, and then I'll yield. I know the committee's gone on a while, but at what point, I think Senator Henrich made some very important points about drawing red lines, but at what point are we going to have clear definitions about malign activities in cyberspace being acts of war or acts of terrorism, and then have appropriate responses, whether they be through cyber, through sanctions, or other? When are we going to get that clarity? Because we don't have it today.
Senator, I don't believe that we will ever have a definitive one-size-fits-all definition for these type things. Every single attack will have to handled on a case-by-case basis, and you will have to judge the damage that was caused, who made the attack. Was it just a non-state actor or just a malicious hacker? We'd have to go after that person in terms of criminal activity. So I don't believe we're ever going to have a specific definition that says, if this happens, we will trigger this response. Each one will be handled in a case-by-case basis and be proportional.
Well, thank you. Mr. Chair, I think the lack of clarity, though, the only concern that I have is you're not establishing some level of known deterrent. And that's why I understand the complexities of it. I've worked in the field, but I think that without that clarity, you're more likely to have more things that you're going to have to look at and figure out how to do a situational response. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you, gentlemen, for your testimony today on a really important topic. Now, I believe, and I was looking for the transcript, but at the joint press conference between President Xi and President Obama, that President China, I think, publicly stated that they don't engage in these kind of cyber activities. Was that an accurate statement, if that was indeed what he said, in terms of cyber warfare? It's pretty remarkable if you're in a press conference with another head of state and you just say something that seems to be pretty blatantly false.
Well, it is, and I think apart from the statements, at least for our part, it will be what happens now. What will there be a change in their behavior? And as I said earlier, my hopes ring eternal, but I personally am somewhat of a skeptic, but it will be our responsibility to look for the presence or absence of their purloining of intellectual property and other information.
And were any of you gentlemen or all of you gentlemen consulted on the terms of the agreement?
We were aware of the negotiations, but at least from normally intelligence wouldn't be a voice or shaper of a policy agreement like this between two heads of state. It will, I think our responsibility is to report what they do.
We participated in the buildup of the visit in terms of policy development, et cetera. But in terms of what went on between the two leaders of the nations, we were not directly consulted.
Admiral?
And I was aware of the ongoing process, and like Secretary of Work, same thing, part of the broad effort and preparation for the visit.
But you didn't see the terms of this agreement before did you, Mr. Secretary? Let's assume that, kind of past this prologue here, and, we were talking about intellectual property. As you know, our country's been trying to get the Chinese to stop stealing U.S. intellectual property for decades, really, and it hasn't really worked out very well. Let's assume that that this agreement, that there is some additional cyber theft that we can attribute to China, what would you recommend the actions of the United States should be, particularly in light of this agreement?
I wouldn't be able to answer that. I would have to know what the degree of the activity would be.
Let's say another OPM kind of activity.
I think the Department of Defense would recommend a very vigorous response.
And, Mr. Secretary, what would you, just give me a sense of what that would be. Sanctions, retaliation?
Could be any of those, Senator, maybe all of the above. It will depend upon the severity of the activity. But again, I know this is a big point of contention with the committee. We are serious about cost imposition, and our statement is, if you participate in this activity, we will seek some type of measure which imposes costs upon you. And we just do not think it's a proportional cyber attack for a cyber attack. It might be something entirely different, like a criminal indictment or sanctions or some other thing.
Let me ask kind of a related question for all three of you. And I know you've been discussing this, so I'm sorry if I'm kind of going over areas that we've already discussed, but help us think through the issue of rules of engagement here. We have rules of engagement in so many other spheres of the military that are well established. How do we think through these issues, which I think in some ways are the fundamental aspects of what we do in response to cyber attacks? Admiral, do you want to take a stab at that?
So if you look at the defensive side, I'm pretty comfortable that we've got a good, broad recognition of what is permissible within a rules of engagement framework.
Do we? I mean, between us and other nations?
I wouldn't, if you define it between us and other nations, I would know. I apologize. I thought your question was within a DoD kind of responsive framework. If you want to expand it to a broader set of nations, then it's probably fair to say no.
I would agree. I think when it comes to offensive, if you're thinking about offensive cyber warfare, we probably do not have defined rules of engagement.
I agree with what Director Clapper said earlier, Senator, that this really is the Wild West right now. There's a lot of activity going on, both from nation-state actors all the way down to criminals. And so sorting through each of the different attacks and trying to attribute what happened and who it came from and who was responsible for it, all demand specific responses on these attacks. But I agree totally with the committee that we need to strengthen our deterrence posture. And the best way to do that is continue to work through these things and make sure that everyone knows that there will be some type of cost.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
The committee would also like to know when there's going to be a policy that would fit into these attacks and would then be much more easily responded to if we had a policy as mandated by the 2014 Defense Authorization Bill. I thank the witnesses for a very helpful hearing. I know that they're very busy, and the committee appreciates your appearance here today. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.